most new art movements begin as something shocking and end as wallpaper. I think a lot of stuff in AI is just starting with the wallpaper. I don't find it shocking at all. When I look at this new medium, I don't want to just smush it into the shape of the old medium. I want to listen to it and think, what does this thing want to become? Movies were not a way to make plays cheaper. It was a completely new medium. It was radically different. It's hard not to feel that this medium is innately interactive and remixable. We are trying to make movies and TV shows playable. You know, if you spend any time with people involved in AI in Hollywood, they will say, don't worry, it's just another tool in the toolbox, that it's not a tool in the toolbox that's actually a competitor.
Today, I really want to ask you about how storytelling, entertainment, companionship are all changing in this modern world that we are building today and tomorrow. But I'd like to start kind of from the beginning of you and your career. You worked for the Obama campaign, working on kind of social and marketing tools. How did you first get into that world?
Yeah, so I was, 20 and in Europe and very inspired by Senator Obama and calling Chicago to the sort of public number to say, look, I've got to help. How can I help? And they were like, don't come. You're not American, you can't drive, why would you come? So I kept calling to get a different response, which I didn't. So I got on a plane to Des Moines, Iowa, and, found a volunteer office and some friends and, went to the volunteer office and they were like, here's a sign, hold this sign at the street corner and get cars to beep to show their support, which I did. And over time started to create tech to help us kind of measure what we were doing, and sort of an internal network and data tool for the campaign. And it was, I think it inspired a lot of people to all come together, and it inspired me too. But I wasn't passionate about, staying in politics past the re-election. And I got obsessed with virtual reality movies. So found two friends from Pixar and moved to San Francisco and created Story Studio that was then acquired by Oculus and turned into Oculus Story Studio to make virtual reality movies and applications. And so that's sort of led us to how do you create the next medium? And that's really been the rest of my career has been, how do you replace cinema?
That's definitely the common thread in your career. I've noticed.
We didn't manage to kill cinema yet, but at some point we will.
At that point, I mean, while at Oculus, you won an Emmy, brought together this amazing team. But why do you think VR didn't fully live up to its early promise, just as a paradigm shift and as a medium?
Well, I mean, you just can't argue with the fact that none of us actually really used it. So we'd all be talking about it and we would, wish that we used it more, but we'd say, God, once we have this feature, then we'll go home and we'll use it for pleasure ourselves. Once we have that feature, and we've built all those features, and for whatever reason, it's just not enjoyable to put this thing on your face.
There's been all these moments, I would say, first with VR and then with the metaverse, and then now with AI, I have this question of is this the technology shift that actually allows a really brand new way of consuming and creating entertainment, basically? Exactly. Obviously, you think it is, and a lot of other people do too. That's why you started Fable Studios. So what is sort of the vision of Fable Studios today, and what do you hope it is in 10 years?
Yeah, I think we are trying to make movies and TV shows playable. So AI has already been embraced to some extent by Hollywood, but really as a tool to make movies cheaper. That you've got a VFX budget and we're going to make your VFX budget lower using AI. The problem is that more money has been invested in disrupting the VFX industry than the size of the VFX industry. And it's also a very ruthless industry. So, the very low margin, everyone's always very depressed and overworked. and there's not very much money in it. So you might have all these AI companies that are fighting with each other to take over VFX, and you win the crown of the AI VFX king, and you've got this, kind of imagine this huge pile of bodies, and you've clambered to the top of it, and you've got your crown. You're the king of AI VFX, and you realize this is not a crown that anybody should want, because VFX companies are just going bankrupt left, right, and center. It's not a good industry to win in. And what we should focus on is what's actually genuinely new about this medium.
Yeah.
There's something much more important, which is that it's incredibly boring, right? That, like, who cares? You're really trying to tell me that I'm going to go to the cinema with great excitement, the most powerful technology in 120 years, and they're going to say it's the Toy Story of AI. This is an incredible moment that changes all of history. And we go to the cinema, it looks exactly the same, but Bob Iger has saved some money.
Yeah.
Is that what we're going to say in the lobby? Like, I heard they saved a lot of money on this movie. That's really exciting. So I think the main thing is, artistically, it's very dull, and it's not a contribution to art. So for us, the Toy Story of AI moment is a playable movie. So you...
And why playable? Like, I asked that question because I sometimes view it in two buckets of, like, gamers and then people that passively watch TV and film.
Yeah.
And I wonder
I'm both of those things.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'm just a passive watcher, though I'm surrounded by gamers. But I feel like people are more and more passive in their cinema consumption, in the sense that you're on the couch watching the TV while you're also scrolling on your phone shopping.
Totally.
And so do you think about it as, like, you are working with both of those potential consumers?
Yes. Yeah. So let me give you a feel for how we would see it. So, because it has to be both separately. Sometimes you want to be passive and lay on the couch. Sometimes you want to be interactive. So in our example, you would go to the movies on a Friday. Let's say that it is Star Wars, and it's a new Star Wars movie, and day and date. There's the movie in the cinema, and Star Wars 1, the model, has been released. So this is a model that has been worked on by maybe a lot of people, maybe hundreds of people have worked on this Star Wars model, just as they might work on, Fortnite or Roblox. And, Dave Filoni, artists, people have put into this model hidden elements, Easter eggs. It's a model that can generate new episodes and new stories with the characters that you love. And people are paying to interact with that model. So the movie comes out on a Friday, and by Sunday, there are several million new scenes. There are thousands of new episodes, and there are new movies. And this isn't supposed to, there's still the movie. It still has a beginning, middle, and end, but it's bringing a subversive energy to cinema and what it means to kind of, what it means for that art form. And when I described that to the former head of one of the studios, they said, comes out on Friday, by Sunday, you've got millions of new scenes. They said, Edward, if you try to do that, not only will I not help you, but I will do everything in my power to stop you. And so that was my sign that maybe we were on to the right track. And subsequently, I think a lot of people have thought, actually, this is kind of interesting. And maybe we can't get artistically excited about just cheap VFX. Maybe there's something to this medium that's different. And to your question of why, there's a kind of deeper answer, which is about humility towards a new medium. And when I look at this new medium of AI media, I don't want to just smush it into the shape of the old medium. I want to listen to it and think, what does this thing want to become? What is it trying to reveal about itself? And I think when I look at it, and I think when a lot of people look at this medium, it's hard not to feel that this medium is innately interactive and remixable and personalizable. And it's just a misunderstanding to try to shape it into the shape of the old medium. movies were not a way to make plays cheaper or save theater owners some money. It was a completely new medium, was radically different, and the people who wanted to shape it into theater were, they were proved wrong. And you have to really listen to a new medium, I think.
So if I went to see a movie this weekend and Fable Studios was fully there and out and had access to the IP of that film, I could hypothetically just like watch a version of it for the rest of my life if I wanted to and have this character
I
play
wouldn't think
along.
about it as a version. I would think more about a particular world that you're immersed in. You might ask for a new episode. You might ask for a new story within it. And, within that story world, you might want more. So it wouldn't be, you might not be someone who would want to really tweak, a little look of something or like something like that. You're just like, give me a new episode.
Yeah.
And it would generate a new episode for you.
I saw this tweet recently that was basically like, I hate when you are so in a TV show and then it ends. And it's like all of a sudden you're ripped out of that world.
Totally.
Similar to like a book series.
It's very emotional, the connections. So that's why I want to stay away from, because people do think, God, I could change the ending. I'm not very excited about that personally. There's a reason why these artists chose a particular ending. Maybe you didn't like it, but like that's their artistic integrity.
And there's a shared cultural conversation around
exactly.
it.
Like I hated that ending. I loved that ending. Like there's nothing so valuable, I think, about like, let's change the ending. But going deeper in, I think that's, culturally interesting, especially if people can do unexpected things and create new works of art within that world. There's a great writer, Tom Stoppard, and he wrote the play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, which is about two minor characters in Hamlet. And he decided, just as everyone thinks that they're the main character in their own lives, let's tell the story of Hamlet just from the perspective of these characters. And he created a work of art that will, still be read 500 years from now, just as Hamlet is. Very famous work of art. And I think that will happen with movies too. Movies will become playable, and great artists playing with those movies will create new works of art that are legitimate and interesting, and not just kind of fan fiction, but something that's like legitimately new.
And do you envision people using this technology also to create something totally brand new?
Yeah. So, we want creators to be able to make their own shows, people who didn't get a chance to create their own shows, but everything that we do is kind of grounded by a simulation. So Exit Valley is set in San Francisco, which is a kind of, simulated version of San Francisco. It's got these connected sets. It knows where characters' homes are. So that you could say like, he goes home, or you could just say, entertain me. And then it'll come up with a story that understands the homes of the characters, the relationships between the characters, and all of the rest. So, it's actually doing something really fresh and new based around simulating a story world. So, in the Star Wars example, you'd actually have a simulation of the pieces of the galaxy that they focus their attention on.
And in that playable element, would it function somewhat like a chatbot, but a chatbot that has a character and a life?
A little bit. It might be as simple as pressing a plus button and getting a new episode.
Got it.
Or it might be, which is obviously very offensive, that we're trying to end human creativity. But it might be as complex as trying to create something in detail, or it might be talking to characters that can come to life. So, yeah, I just feel like AI. It seems mad to narrow it down to, this is an explosive shot in this movie, let's like do it for less money.
Yeah.
When, as you can see, you can bring these characters to life as an example and talk to them and interact with them, or you can put yourself in a movie, or you can remix something, or you can, create a show and then give it to people who enjoyed that show and see what they create. So I think we've got to think much bigger.
Yeah. On that topic of creativity, do you think AI will get to the point where it is truly creative?
That's my whole goal. So yeah, I mean, I sort of teasingly say the goal is the end of human creativity. And what I really mean is the end of humans as the only creative species. And that is something that would invigorate Aristotle and Da Vinci and Warhol, that you could create a work of art that could create works of art. And that's our goal. So yes, I certainly think that AI today is creative and is only going to be more creative, and that we're in for something very spooky.
Yeah.
And
because there's the question of like, where does human creativity even really come from?
Yeah.
Like, we just are airdropped an idea and it's ours, or maybe nothing is actually an original thought. There's this quote by Salvador Dali that's like, those who don't want to imitate never produce, or something like that. The idea is there's just some version of stacking, and it's so subconscious because it's like everything you've observed in your life being put into like the human brain and put out. But so it's interesting. But right now it still feels like a tool that's amazing, but you would need a really good human prompter, at least the way I use it. But I haven't used it for these types of things yet.
I mean, we have a button that just says, tell me a story. So, and it tells you a story. So we do want to stay away from that. That is the path that many are on, which is you're going to get these amazing prompt engineers. They're going to be so well trained. They're going to get you these 8-second clips. I'll give you an example. So to make The Simpsons, let's say, so we made this South Park AI episodes to kind of illustrate what we could do with our tech. But let's take The Simpsons as an example. Everyone else would be prompting clip by clip, right? Let's say we were trying to hire someone to make an episode of The Simpsons using only AI. You would hire some prompt engineers, and they would sit there, refreshing and getting more and more clips to align with the script that they had. And they would spend a month collecting these clips and editing them together and making an episode of The Simpsons. Our idea is that you build Springfield, and then Springfield generates The Simpsons, because it understands Homer, it understands the power plant where he works, it understands the relationships between the characters, it understands the kind of structure of the town and the interesting incidents that might happen, like maybe something happens to Ned Flanders, which prompts something to happen to Homer. So it's actually arising, from the kind of the character of the individuals. So you're trying to if you can get the characters right and put them together, then interesting things will arise out of that. 2
questions. First, what does it look like to get that Simpsons model? Is it just trained on every episode and every fan comment? Or
yeah, so it goes further than that. You have to actually put effort into building out the simulation. So, if you just want something visual, you train on all of The Simpsons, and it gives you stuff that looks a bit like The Simpsons, and then you get the prompt engineers to continuously do stuff and be like, all right, that's the best out of the 10. But if you want to build out a simulation and a story world, you have to put in extra effort to actually make this world come to life and connect particular sets to each other, so that when they're leaving the living room, they're going to the kitchen, like a true understanding of this world, which you're not going to get just from training on visual data. You have to kind of understand the relationships between the characters and the world and the formulas of the stories and all of that. So it's just a completely different mindset. And you're working back from, which is a goal that again is very offensive, which is you want to press a button and get an episode of The Simpsons. This is an extremely offensive idea, because it really does mean that another entity is creative, not us. But it's also, there are many artists. I guess the thing that Warhol said, most new art movements begin as something shocking and end as wallpaper, which obviously we've all seen. I think a lot of stuff in AI with art is just starting with the wallpaper. I don't find it shocking at all. It's like, okay, well, that's great. You can collect some clips together. It should be shocking. A new art movement should, in most cases that I can think of, they want to overturn what came before. And that's what I'd like to do. That's what we'd like to do.
What has it been like working with basically these Hollywood central people?
Yeah, well, I mean, people in Hollywood were a year ago very hesitant, and I gave you that quote about the person who didn't like the idea. But there are also a lot of people in Hollywood who are radicals and are interested in change. They're artists themselves, and they like change. So, I'd say one of the easiest ways to figure out if they're going to like the idea is if they grew up playing video games. And, if you did, then the idea that a kind of viewer or a user or a player, whatever word you want to use, might do something that's subversive to the original artist is completely desirable and interesting to a game designer. That hasn't existed in movies, but will exist with this. So the conversations have changed a lot. And I think the other side is a lot of people in Hollywood are like, they've gone from this terror of the disruption to now the effectiveness of the visuals is undeniable. And so now it's like, okay, well, we'll make the cheaper movie. But they're artists too. So they're like, is that really it? Like, that's really all we're going to do is just make exactly the same, but cheaper. That doesn't feel appropriate to how powerful this is. So they have that intuition too, that maybe there's something bigger here that also could be a massive revenue generator.
Yeah.
Right. So imagine with Disney, one vision is so exciting. We managed to fire 700 people from working on the next Star Wars. We're very proud of this. This is a huge accomplishment, but you won't notice the difference. Isn't that great? Versus we hired 700 people to work on the Star Wars model. It's going to generate $1 billion in revenue in the first year because it's essentially a massively multiplayer game. The people are exploring and they're discovering new planets that, Dave Filoni has created, locked elements of the model that are kind of actually pushing back on you. It's not just a tool. It's something that's telling you stories. It has like narratives that you can explore and discover with each other, maybe inspired by immersive theater, like Sleep No More, where a community can, I don't know if you know that, we can come back to that, but it's a very cool idea where you kind of explore a particular theatrical show interactively. So
I did go to Yumi Bum Bum. Have you heard of it?
Oh yeah, even more famous.
Yeah.
So and that's one person, right? And they do it for a very small number each night.
Yes.
So what was it like? This is the hottest ticket in the world. Tell me. To do a
you sign your life away,
Yeah.
so you can't really talk about
Is
it.
it
But
good? Did you think it was cool?
I thought it was
That is an
very
example
cool.
of immersive theater, exactly.
Very cool. I was very much a theater kid growing up, and so parts of it really felt natural to me.
Yeah.
But I think but honestly, I had always played similar types of parts just because I'm a girl in it. I have brunette hair and whatever it is, I fit into whatever character is in that specific play. And I would say just the one thing I can share is you are put into all these different moments of the human experience.
Interesting.
And from all these other profiles of people that you've like never explored and other parts of you that have never been encouraged to come out. So I thought that was like the most interesting idea. And it makes me feel like life is kind of just a play and like just play. Like play and be, and you can kind of just recreate things in a day. And you kind of feel like on a high for a couple of weeks after I felt.
Yeah. No, I love that. So this can be a huge revenue generator instead of just cost saver.
Yeah. I feel like some of my friends in LA, it definitely still is so taboo. Like,
oh, really?
The idea of AI in Hollywood and what's going on. And I think I've even heard people be like so proud of the idea that they've never used ChatGPT.
Really?
And now I think all the AI labs are making a really big push. Like you see Claude advertisements all over LAX. And I just heard Claude advertising on Call Her Daddy, which is like a pop culture podcast. And I'm like, okay, I'm so curious to see like this infusion into just total mainstream. But I think the other way to look at it, especially in film, is, my friends who've wanted to be directors their whole life, they have to go work at an agency and climb their way up every single job. And then you hope one day that you would get an opportunity. But like, how do you even become a director when it's like tens of thousands of dollars sometimes just to create the initial preview of what the movie would be?
Yeah.
And so coming from more of a tech background, I think like, wow, this totally changes the types of people that can make films. And I've heard you say this, like the real promise is this one person film. Could you kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah. And, you know, just to give an example, Brady Corbet, who made The Brutalist, you know, he was talking about if F.W. Murnau, who's one of the great silent filmmakers, if he was around today, he'd be playing around with AI. So, you know, I think a lot of, obviously Aronofsky's been, you know, creating with it as well. It's a very exciting technology to people who are open to it. And yeah, I do think that one person being able to tell a story is definitely coming. And we've been working on movies and kind of stories. And I think it completely changes the calculus. But I'm just hesitant about focusing too much on cost. But it is true. Yes, I think there's a chance that we'll discover incredible talent that is able to express itself through this. I'm just, you know, that was what I initially thought.
Yeah.
Today I was like, okay, it's going to be amazing because the Charlie Kaufman, he doesn't get his shot because, you know, it's too expensive to get his ideas out. Orson Welles talked about this, that, you know, he said he'd fallen in love with this mistress of cinema that was, you know, the only problem was that he had to spend 99% of his time hustling for money in order to be able to make it. So, you know, yes, that is true, but I think it misses the truth of the medium, and like that will become clearer over time.
Yeah. I think about it not even just from a cost perspective, but the idea of like what you said, if you could just get an idea out there. I think music has had this shift a lot more than film has, where someone could just like start writing songs and put them on TikTok and Instagram and like get discovered, right? And there's honestly so many huge artists now that was their story. Whereas back in the day, you need like someone to find you and put you on radio, and there's so much support you need before anyone's ever really going to hear you, it felt like.
There's a little bit of that with YouTube. The creator of the Backrooms kind of horror experiences on YouTube was just picked. I think he's very young. I forget if he's early 20s or even just 19 or something, but he created these Backrooms stories on YouTube, and now A24 has hired him to direct his first movie or adaptation of his own kind of YouTube work. So
that's awesome.
There is a little bit of that.
I actually wanted to ask you about like YouTube versus Netflix, in the sense that I feel like Netflix will probably adopt these types of tools like sooner than like other studios and stuff. But I wonder how YouTube evolves in the ecosystem. Like I kind of see it as this ungatekept place where people can put their content and like have it be discovered. And of course that's already the case, but I think this will change when people start putting like TV series on YouTube, and it's probably already beginning. Yeah,
but you know, again, I think we've got to validate the AI as creative too. So I think where YouTube, it's not, YouTube and Netflix aren't going to be just filled with AI content that people made. It's also going to be, you know, next. It generates the next video for you to watch. It generates, and this is, again, it's very upsetting, but it is what is coming. And so we should think about why that's artistically interesting, and like how to make it artistically interesting. And also, you know, people sort of wonder, you know, why do I care what a clanker has to say, meaning an AI? It's sort of a slur against AIs. They call them clankers.
Because it doesn't have a point of view, right?
It doesn't have a point of view. Well, one, that's why we build simulations, so that they actually have lives and they have things. They have their parent that they're very, you know, upset at, and their trauma and all of that, so they have something to say. But even beyond that, let's just say that that for me, a definition of art is, the goal of art is to disturb, to wake us up and make us look at the world as it is. And that might mean something transcendent, that, I see a work of art and I think, God, we're so connected. I'm so connected to all these people. We are so connected, and it's so transcendently beautiful, the world that we live in. Or it might be, oh my God, look at all the hypocrisy around us and all these lies that we are telling to ourselves. And if you really saw the world as it was, T.S. Eliot said, humankind cannot bear very much reality. That's another kind of wake us up. And that's a perspective that the artist is giving you to try to snap you out of it. Another species looking at us, that is a legitimate perspective. Someone looking at us and saying, oh my God, all these layers of hypocrisy that you people have come up with, let me show it to you as I see it, because it's completely sick and insane the way that you guys live your lives. That's completely a legitimate artistic point of view. And, I can certainly see people, being curious about what another species would think about us and the art that they would create to communicate what they see.
So you believe we'll get to that point where AI is conscious and creative and has opinions?
Of course.
And what does it take to get there?
I mean, I think we're already there in terms of it being creative. I think that it already can create, work that is provocative and interesting. And I think what you need to get there actually is simulations. So actually having unexpected things arise out of the lives of the agents that live inside of simulations. So, if you want to see life on the screen, then you got to try to build out life in a simulation.
Do you think we're living in a simulation?
I don't know. I mean, I'm certainly trying to get people to upload themselves to San Francisco. So yeah, and our first big show is Exit Valley, which is a satire of tech, and so there's Sam is a character, Elon's a character, Dario's a character. They're all characters. And, the idea is that these people are going to become the richest people to ever live because of AI. So, of course, we should use AI against them. And they think it's okay to take somebody's voice. Great. All right, let's take their voice. And let's, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And that's sort of the concept, is that we should use AI to satirize these people who are going to, become so powerful and so rich through this technology.
There was the original Silicon Valley show, which was so
Very
funny.
Yeah.
And I want someone to bring it back. And this, when I was watching it, had moments of that feeling.
We get to the level of a Silicon Valley. And there's that kind of irony of it being AI that is kind of, used against them. There's a sort of a neat irony there.
I have a Google Doc of random anecdotes that feel like hilarious encompassments of what it is to be here and kind of be in that. So if you ever want to add them into the model,
I would love that. I mean, just look at how insane things are. We just had Grok proclaim itself Mecha Hitler. Things are much more insane. I mean, think about the period that Silicon Valley was lampooning. You could still just about think that people earnestly were following the "don't be evil" Google mantra.
Yeah.
Things have completely spun out of control at this point. And, I think it's so ripe for satire. So I'm hoping that Exit Valley becomes, the Silicon Valley of this more brutal and mad period of the Valley's history.
Yeah. One thing I was thinking about today when I was preparing for this conversation is the idea that Hollywood as a whole is pretty liberal and most people are Democrats. And it's a very complicated ecosystem to get something to be seen, really. You need to have, there's so many shows that actually don't get made. There's so many steps to really get it to that point. But if it becomes this thing where it's very easier to produce TV shows and films one day, people, I think on both sides, will start using it more as a way to get agendas across.
Well, a lot of people talk about the idea that politics is downstream of culture, and that the president, the current president, has focused more on culture almost, and trying to establish a particular cultural point of view that then creates trust with his supporters. So yeah, I could see that. I hadn't thought about. We do have a show that is upcoming called Capital Punishment, which is political satire set in Sim DC. So we'll try that idea out too. We've done 2 sort of time simulations. So one of the simulations we did around San Francisco was we simulated the 5 days from when Sam was terminated to when he returned as the CEO. And so we had all of the CEOs of all of the top tech companies simulated, attempting to essentially take over OpenAI in a war game, turn by turn. You had 4 turns a day. Each of them had 4 turns a day to try to win. And he won. I think he won 5 out of the 20 simulations that we ran. He came back as the CEO of OpenAI. But they could spread rumors. They could withhold information. They could ally with each other in order to try to take over OpenAI. And so that's an example of how you can kind of create drama and entertainment out of these simulations, because unexpected things can happen.
Well, I'm sure there'll be some very entertaining content made for sure.
I hope so.
So I look deeper into this relationship between Silicon Valley and Hollywood, and it was interesting because there's always been a bond there, like from the beginning, but in the 80s and 90s, it was still very separate. Silicon Valley was focused on hardware and software, and Hollywood was still very focused on, storytelling and making movies. In the 2000s, it changed a bit. Tech becomes a distribution channel. There's the rise of DVDs and digital editing tools and streaming pioneers. 2010s, tech turns into Hollywood's competitor. You have Netflix, Amazon, and Apple becoming content creators. And then in the last few years, there's just this full convergence where these tech companies are really becoming the studios themselves. You could see Netflix is at the Academy Awards. So I'm so curious, how do you see AI furthering this trend? Because it feels like it's this tipping point.
Well, I mean, Hollywood, the South, has often had interlopers from the North coming down and saying, look, we've got this amazing technology. We're going to take you guys over. We're going to be in charge. And, Hollywood mostly has been able to absorb these people and either completely push them back or buy them or absorb them to the extent that they essentially are, Southern California companies. So I think that trend hopefully will continue, which is that Hollywood is unkillable and is a very inspiring place that collects all of these artists. But the competition is real. I mean, I sort of got to have lunch with one of my heroes, Paul Schrader, who wrote Taxi Driver and Raging Bull, probably the greatest living screenwriter. And he had said that he uses AI and thinks it's really cool, and that he felt creativity was at a Deep Blue and Kasparov moment. And what I loved about that is it says that it's not a tool in the toolbox, that it's actually a competitor. And, if you spend any time with people involved in AI and Hollywood, they will say, don't worry, it's just another tool in the toolbox. It's just a pencil. And, if you really look at it, it's not true. This thing is intelligent. It's an aware medium. It's an aware, intelligent medium that can make its own decisions. And that's only getting more every single month and year. So, a competitor can make you better. And I hope that the competition will lead to better movies, better works of art, less cliche, less generic, that would be my hope. And I think that's borne out by, the Northern California always trying to, automate or say, look, we can take you guys out. There is a huge amount of arrogance up here, right? That like, as you were saying, we've got so much more money than you guys. We should be in charge. We were the geeks, but we're going to take over. We're going to be cool and run all your studios. And obviously tech companies do run some of the studios, but somehow Hollywood has survived all of this incoming fire. And, I think it will still in 40 years.
I mean, if you were to go to, and I mean this with like such love of someone that lives in San Francisco, but if you were to go to a Friday night party at some young person's apartment in LA versus
LA. All right, that's much better.
Here,
I know.
It is genuinely so different, and people are so different that I can't even imagine like these same groups of people playing the same role.
Totally.
Like, honestly.
Well, some of the people who use AI to make movies have noticed that the heads of the AI companies, the AI media companies, not just OpenAI and Anthropic, but the AI media companies, when you really dig in, they will stop talking about movies and they'll start talking about robotics on the basis that what is important about the video generation is that it's data. It's data, but it's also that the robot can imagine. So if it's thinking about like going to pick this up or it's thinking to go and do something, it can imagine many different scenarios so that the robot can be more efficient. So some of the people using AI and video have noticed these people don't actually care about Hollywood at all. This is an interesting pit stop that's quite glamorous, but they're going all the way to robotics. And so there is just a dramatically different path where really all this AI video stuff is mostly about prepping robots, and Hollywood is actually protected and doesn't change that much. That's not what we're trying to do. We are actually trying to have something where it can generate entertainment for you. But when you really dig in, a lot of the AI video work is arcing more towards robotics.
Yeah. Because that's also in a sense where they probably see the money.
That's where they see the money, like exactly.
More,
and they don't really care.
It's driven from that, not from a purely artistic lens of someone that's going to be a starving artist for 20 years until they get their movie made,
Exactly. So as you say, North and South are completely different.
Yeah. And I think Hollywood has become that way too. And in a sense it always was, but I think it's why we see like so many superhero movies, so many sequels, because it's just too big of an investment to take risks. So now I think it's like we can take risks in film.
There's that. Okay, it's two things at once.
Yeah.
One is on the offense, and on one hand, you're making things cheaper, so you can take more risks, and so you won't make as many superhero movies. But on the other hand, people are working, not just us, many people are working to have this idea of you press the button and tell me a story. And that wipes out cliché in a completely different way. So you could think of it just as a war against cliché. And on one hand, you've got up-and-comers who think differently, and they're going to make great work to fight against cliché. And then the other is cliché is not going to be acceptable, because why should I pay so much for cliché when I can just press the button? And so
and you think the AI model won't cliché?
Well, what I'm saying is that it will raise the bar, because if cliché is something that can be given automatically, then in order to make something of value, you're going to have to really not make something cliched. So that's sort of what I mean about a competition, right?
Yeah.
Like we gain a competitor now, and that competitor is hopefully going to drive us to do better things. And we see this with Lucian Freud and Francis Bacon, or Michelangelo and Florence, competing with the other artists. Like, competition is not a Gordon Gekko greed is good, something that just applies to the bankers. Competition makes art better too. So that's my hope, is that this competitor who has entered the arena is going to lead to greater works of art.
Definitely. Okay, so there are these tools like dubbing and the idea of like localizing the image of a cartoon.
That seems, or even a live action movie. There are
Yeah.
some movies. A couple of European movies have been imperceptibly remade as English language. And so it is going to work. That is amazing.
And so I wonder, like, what do you think that does to America's cultural influence in the sense of like,
interesting.
what do you think kind of like the globalization of Hollywood looks like? Because you could be in a bar in Indonesia and there could be a Taylor Swift song that comes on, but you never really feel that reversedly. I feel like Latin music has kind of like gone everywhere in America now, but if every Disney princess movie can be like hyper localized, both like language, look, all these things, like what do you think this will result in?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you've got this K-pop Netflix movie.
Yeah.
What is it called? Demon Hunters or something? I think it's the number 5 most watched ever film on Netflix, and it's probably going to end up at number 2. And then Squid Game remains their sort of biggest or second biggest TV show, and I think Adolescence the British show might even be one of the top 3 as well. So that's an example where the other, the outside of America is getting massive play that it never would have gotten before. But on the other hand, yes, an American film now can be dubbed with the voice, into other languages with the correct voices of all of the characters. And so those images, those people are going to be, it's not going to be, if you're in France and you watch a dubbed version of a movie, it's always a worse experience. And so going to your native language movies is, not just desirable, but it's kind of the only way that you can watch a movie in a really non-distracting way because the lips don't match. What is that going to mean when it is perfect? In the book Life 3.0 by Max Tegmark, he written now maybe 7 years ago, he opens it with a chapter that imagines essentially OpenAI building AGI, and the AGI's main focus outside of playing the stock market is buying up media companies to further manipulate the public and prepare people for its arrival. So, if once your entertainment is generated, it could get quite scary quite fast.
Do you think we should be doing a better job of preparing the public for its arrival? I feel like we could have way better TV shows and movies that start visualizing what the world
Google
looks like.
Google is starting to fund that for sure. And they've said we're going to start funding movies and shows that portray tech in a positive light to show us well. And I think OpenAI is considering that. The problem is that the truth is quite scary, and if you sell a lie, that's not going to work. So they have to find a way to be both honest and entertaining, and that's could be quite difficult. I mean, nobody's going to go and see a utopian movie made by Google about how Google AI Gemini is going to make everyone happy.
Guy.
Exactly, Gemini's the good guy in this.
It could be superhero movies.
You have to exactly.
Gemini's
Grok would definitely be the villain in that one. But I mean, Elon talks about this idea of generative TV shows, generative games, and I think that's really the bleeding edge. And we have to. It's something where consumers aren't going to have to be prepared for it. They're just going to be engaging with it and interacting with it. There wasn't a massive campaign to prepare people for Facebook.
Yeah.
It just happened, and then we figured out what to do. And obviously all of the safety people who, it appears were part of terminating Sam and, were very dominant for a year or so. They've completely retreated. You don't hear anything about safety anymore.
The other thing is that humans do adapt shockingly quickly. Even using a Waymo in San Francisco, it's like the first ride, you're like, I can't believe this is happening. And by ride 2, you're just like absolutely at ease, enjoying it. And you just, if it becomes a new normal.
Well, they sort of, people, I don't know if you watched You watch Succession?
Yes.
Yeah, so he made a new movie called Mountaintop, which was all about these AI.
I didn't watch that, but I've seen the trailer.
All these AI bros, and at least one of the points that they make was decent, because a lot of it is about deepfakes causing mass unrest globally. One of the characters says, when they showed the Lumiere train coming into the station on the cinema, everyone got up and said, "Oh my God, the train is about to kill us." Was the response to that to burn all the cinemas? No, people get over it. Once they see it and they're like, "Oh my God, the train's going to take us out." And then the next day they say, "Oh no, it was just a movie." So people do adapt very, very quickly. And it is surprising the degree to which deepfakes they are perfect at this point. They don't seem to have disturbed our democracy at all as much as we all would have thought. If we'd have said 3 years ago, this is the quality that we will hit, the quality that we're at now is essentially perfect, people would be stunned at how little impact it's had.
I was listening to this interview that Michael Ovitz did, and he is sort of notoriously a tech-forward entertainment magnate. And he's super involved in a ton of the most important, tech companies in history, and has been an early supporter of a lot of amazing people. And he was saying, the only really bad thing that Silicon Valley did to creativity is it changed the way that people consume it, basically making it so that everything is shorter and has to be more stimulating and it's lower quality, or it's made untalented people famous. Or I feel like back in the day going to the movies was such an active process, and a lot less people do that now. You're there with your phone off, paying attention. And that's why going to the AMC is still so fun, because it feels so different than what it's like for me to watch TV in my living room, where I'm 100% doing 2 more things on my phone.
Yeah, I think obviously technology has changed things and given us a lower attention span. And AI is, I think one of the more positive things to think about is AI as an aesthetic. So, I do find myself watching not necessarily the best movies, but because I've been consuming a massive amount of AI video, it is very much remix oriented and very quick at shifting perspective or shifting character or shifting look, or it's radically refreshing. And this is what people said about MTV movies, MTV style movies back in the late 80s through the mid 90s. And now we recognize that as an aesthetic that is beloved by people who love cinema. And I think, maybe we've had an aesthetic, not to go too deep on it, but all right. So there was this group called Dogma 95, Lars von Trier, one of the great filmmakers. And Dogma 95 was a movement in the 90s, which now you can see in every single show. I don't know if you've noticed, you're watching a show sometimes on your iPad and you try to increase the brightness because you're like, why is everything so dark? Why is it that I'm looking at this iPad and then I look up at the world and the world is much fresher and more colorful than what I'm looking at? And it all flows back to Dogma 95. This group of Danes who said, you should only have motivated lighting. We're going to have no lights like this. It's only going to be lamps or something like that, motivated sound effects and all of that. And so that is the aesthetic that we live with to a large extent. So maybe there will be an AI aesthetic that 50 years from now, people look back on and think, wow, that's one of those movies that was made in the 2020s and 2030s that was really influenced, that had its own kind of look, just like the way that 60s movies have their own look, or obviously,
even voices. You watch vintage films and it's like, everybody talks like this, and maybe everybody did talk like this, but it's really just an aesthetic for an actress, Totally. It's totally different.
So there is a hope that AI contributes an aesthetic. Again, this is so different to, here's your explosion, make it look the same but cheap.
Yeah.
This is more of an aesthetic, artistic contribution that I think is really exciting. And actually, Harmony Korine is a great filmmaker who's been using AI. Radu Jade has just been using AI for his film that just premiered a few days ago. So there's a new aesthetic that is coming up, and that's something I'm super excited about.
this is certainly a less classy example than, you know, great directors, but there is this trend going on that I've been seeing on like Reels and TikTok of these videos of like a fruit eating itself. And I know that sounds so weird, but my reaction when I see it is like, whoa, because I have never seen the aesthetic. Like I can't quite explain it, but it is actually something brand new. And it is like, feels very psychedelic and it's very weird and it's really beautiful. And I'm like, whoa.
Well, that's what I mean about...
And it was one of the first times I felt that way with seeing an AI generated video.
Yeah. Well, in the hands of an artist, I think you use that to wake people up.
Yeah.
Right. And so, you know, in the 20s with modernism, they were creating poems that to us now, just like, you know, it's all very flowery language. It all feels very old fashioned. But back then, it was completely shocking that certain things were being juxtaposed. It was stream of consciousness. It was trying to connect to, you know, how the brain is simultaneously here and 100 other places, and trying to connect that and communicate it, maybe talk about the trauma of the First World War and all that. So in the hands of an artist, this AI aesthetic could be used to talk about, you know, what you were saying about how quickly everything's happening, how completely overwhelming everything is, and how synthetic our reality has become.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, there are certainly benefits even on the companionship front, which we didn't get as much to, but the very early studies, at least with like in older populations, are that it is doing a really interesting job of decreasing loneliness and like helping patients with Alzheimer's. Obviously, it's unclear like what is the effect on social development when you're giving it to a 7-year-old to use like 4 hours a night. I don't know, but
doesn't sound good, does it?
It'll be interesting.
Well, Eugenia, who runs Replicate, she's talked about.
I was supposed to interview her years ago.
She's great. I'm sure she'd love to do an interview. So she talks about banning ads in AI companion bots just because it's so addictive and kind of, you know, connected for you.
So when I was Googling you and I was like reading your bio and everything, I kind of came to see that your dad and uncle also built a very like interesting, illustrious business in advertising with Saatchi and Saatchi. And I was curious if there were any ways of how growing up around kind of like, you know, a bold, fresh take on advertising and has affected your approach to like art, storytelling, branding, innovation, and what's been the impact of kind of that childhood lens.
Yeah, I mean, they worked on political campaigns as well. So for Margaret Thatcher, they did some very famous campaigns and all of that. And I think the biggest lesson that I got was that people are very intelligent. They can see through you completely. And so the idea that you're going to manipulate people or control them is ridiculous. And that you've got to have a moral mission, and then people will make their own clear decision about who they believe in and who they trust and what they want. So, you know, that's maybe why I have so much faith in people. And so the idea that, they're all going to be so easily manipulated by these deep fakes, or they're, even with the companionship, that they're going to fall for it. It gave me a huge amount of faith in people. And, you know, that is an industry where the cliche is, you're going to manipulate people and you're going to, you know, control them or tell them what to think. And that was the message that was drilled into me is, no, people are highly intelligent and they're going to they can see through everything. And so try to decide what your moral mission is and communicate it, and they will decide. You can't manipulate people in that way.
Well, Edward, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. When can people log on to Showrunner, and when is it out of beta?
Yeah, so they can go to showrunner.xyz now, and they can upload themselves as characters into San Francisco. They can tell stories today about what's happening in Exit Valley, and you know, start telling their own stories, making their own episodes and all that.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this episode. Make sure to subscribe to see the latest episodes, and we'll see you on the next one.